Welcome to 5 Dubs by MDDC Press. I'm your host, Rebecca Snyder, the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, and DC Press Association, which represents news media in our region. 5 Dubs focuses on the who, what, when, where, and why of local news media. We'll talk with the journalists about the stories behind the news. You can find more information about our guests in the show notes or on our website, www.5-dubs.com. Welcome, I'm Rebecca Snyder, and this is 5 Dubs. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland, Delaware, DC Press Association, and today we have a cornucopia of knowledge here in the studio. We are going to be talking about internships, what sort of lessons learned, how you can maximize some of the relationships that you're developing over the summer. And we have a great opportunity because with me we have Shifra Dayak, who is an intern at the Frederick News-Post through the MDDC Reese Cleghorn internship program. And we also have Andy Schotz, the editor of the Frederick News-Post, who is her host newsroom and supervising editor, and Rick Hutzell, who is a writing coach for the MDDC program and also a columnist for the Baltimore Banner. Also joining us is Denise Rolark Barnes. She wears a lot of hats in the world. She was or is Shifra's mentor through the program. She's also the president of MDDC right up until December 31st, 2023, and she is also the publisher of the Washington Informer in DC. So thank you all for being here today.
Thanks, Rebecca.
It's good to have you all. So I wanted to start with Shifra because you're kind of the jewel in the crown here. Tell us a little bit about your internship and you, where you go to school and what you were hoping to achieve. So that's the 3-pack of questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Shifra Dayak. I am a rising senior at the University of Maryland in College Park. And there I'm pursuing dual degrees in multimedia journalism and environmental science and policy. So I applied to the MDDC internship program because I have been interested in local news. I write for the University of Maryland's flagship student newspaper, where we cover a lot of local news both on our campus and kind of in the wider College Park community. So that over the past couple of years has sort of piqued my interest in journalism that really serves a smaller community and touches on a lot of county level, state level, local level issues. So that's kind of how I ended up at the Frederick News-Post this summer, and it's been a really great experience for these past few weeks. I always kind of tell people that I was thrown right into the thick of things, and I'm essentially kind of in the day-to-day doing the same thing as a full-time reporter at the News-Post. So I've gotten to cover a variety of general assignment stories, both things that are sort of on the breaking news side and features about county government, city government, environmental stories, and lots of other stuff. So it's been great.
You really have run the full gamut. And Andy, as the architect of that sort of plunge into the newsroom, and you've hosted a lot of newsroom interns through the years. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of what role interns play in the newsroom and how you use Shifra?
Yeah, to be honest, there's really not much difference. Our interns come in and they are working for us and they're doing journalism. So we don't have any kind of special accommodations. And if you need to get the lay of the land before you start, you might get some orientation, which you naturally would anyway. But then you're just writing, and it could be from day one. I would not consider Shifra any different than our staff. We have a staff of 8 while we have our 2 interns, so that they are 8 reporters.
So how does that, and so I want to get back to Shifra and how you feel about it, but before we do that, the MDDC program recognizes that in places, like Andy's newsroom, there's 8 reporters. You're covering a pretty wide geographic or community deep area. We've built in some supports in the program, like a writing coach, which Rick's doing, and a mentor, which Denise is playing that role for Shifra this summer, to kind of create more wraparound supports to make sure that our interns are getting a full experience, a good experience, and really working on their skills. So, Rick, can you tell us a little bit about what you do in relation to the internship program and what you hope to achieve?
I've been talking about what they're writing, what kind, asking what kind of feedback they're getting from Andy and his staff. And really, it's sort of an intern-led conversation. I asked them about what they've written, what they hope to write, and really sort of listen to what they have to say. It's just part of the MDDC approach toward providing a lot of support from various aspects.
And you, in addition to being a columnist and in the business for a number of years, you were the editor of the Annapolis Capital Gazette. And so, and you've hosted newsroom interns, what Andy's going through, and you've seen the intern world happen before your eyes previously.
I think Andy's. I'm sorry. Andy's newsroom has a great reputation, and there's a lot of support for Shifra and other interns. But it is easy for an intern to get lost in a busy newsroom, and I think that's what Denise and I provide. Just that backstop.
Absolutely, and so. It's an important backstop so that we don't lose people along the way. So Denise, this is the second year that you've been a mentor, a second year that we've piloted or had the mentoring aspect to this program. So what's the role of a mentor? In some ways, Shifra has a lot of people focused on her this summer. What's your focus?
Yes, she does. And I, Shifra and I have played phone tag a lot and email tag, and but it's been really good because we've been very purposeful in making sure that we connected. And I think, my role not only is to make sure that she's enjoying or having a good experience in the best way that I can at her internship, but also to just kind of let her talk to me about, her goals, her aspirations, what she wants to do, to see if there are other ways as a mentor I can be supportive. I hope this goes beyond just this period that we've had to spend together. But, just to get a sense of, because we want her to be a journalist, right? We want her to stick with the profession. We want her to win awards for stories and all that. So it's good to have that wraparound kind of relationship and build a relationship with her. So I've been inspired. I have seen some sort of more confidence in her voice. Andy, since I think the first time that we talked and the last time we talked, she sounds like she's really got this. And I ask her, anything in particular you think you need to share, or any challenges that you're having. So, I know it's hard to really build that with a stranger, but I think the more we talk and the more she knows that I understand what her experience is, I think the better the relationship grows. So for me, it's been a good experience. I hope it's been that way for Shifra as well.
And so, Shifra, when I think about interns, this might be one of the first times that you've been in this wholly professional environment. Like the Diamondback is an amazing student-run publication, but you're there as students, and this is now your job this summer. So how was sort of in thinking about being an intern, how is that different from what you expected?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. So I think, I kind of did know going in that I would be expected to be taking on the same workload as a full-time reporter for the summer. But I didn't exactly know what that entailed until I kind of, was thrown into it. So it was definitely an adjustment, especially with the level of content that we're expected to be putting out. Most full-time reporters, write a story a day on average, give or take a little bit. And I'd never really had a ton of experience with that before, because obviously when I have been working for a student paper, I've been balancing kind of that content output with classes and other extracurriculars and all of that sort of stuff. And so now that I'm here for the summer and wholly focused on journalism, it's really a whole different experience, with calling people every day, constantly working on about 5 different things. So it's been a really great experience, just kind of learning how that flow of content in a professional newsroom works, which I haven't seen before this.
Yeah. Well, and the arc, so Andy, the arc of Shifra's work from beginning to end, because the program is 8 weeks, 40 hours a week, we are all in, all full time. and maybe not, I don't want to put you on the spot on Shifra's work necessarily, but like in general, what kind of development do you see interns having over the course of the summer?
Well, there's no better example to put me on the spot with than with Shifra, because I need to sing her praises very fully, and I will tell you what the arc is. The arc is starting from an extremely high level. I wouldn't say it's like a learning curve. She jumped in. And the story that I want to share, an anecdote about what she did, was it your first day or your second day when you found that lawsuit? Might have been her first day.
Sometime during my first week.
It was no later than her second day in the internship. Just on her own initiative, searching around things that we had covered in the past, and uncovered a Public Information Act lawsuit by a group that we've covered extensively, but had sort of lost track of what had happened with this effort. And she found that the next day in court, there was going to be a decision on this lawsuit, which turned out to be kind of a bombshell for us, because a lot of records related to secret discussions to bring Amazon into Frederick County were now being released because of an advocacy group's lawsuit. And she found out the decision, and helped anchor our coverage of what that was. It turned into several stories that were really pretty impactful. And I give full credit to Shifra for digging that out and covering it. So, right from the start, I found that to be extraordinary. And in all of my experiences working with interns, I've never seen anybody immediately have such an impact that was really useful for us. So I give her high marks. It's not like we're making accommodations with an intern and trying, like, she is really good at what she's doing from the start.
That's actually number one. Yay, Shifra. That is an amazing story. I mean, to do that in your first week, that's pretty incredible. But then I think there's a lesson there for people who are kind of immersing themselves in a newsroom, whether it's for the first time or in a new space, but to just sort of take those chances and say, okay, this is where I see the journalism happening, and not being afraid to be like, well, I just need to wait my turn, or I'm sure my editor's going to mention something. And so, like, that idea of initiative, I'd love to hear. And Rick, I feel like you have something to say around initiative, because, you looked like you had something on your mind. But I'd like to hear everybody kind of weigh in on how interns or new journalists can kind of put themselves forward and really shape coverage. Like, how did that feel for you, Shifra, to make that leap?
Yeah, it was definitely a little bit nerve-wracking at first, because I think those first couple days I was just kind of sitting around and waiting for my editors to give me stories. And it was purely out of coincidence, that I stumbled across the fact that this court case was happening and that all of these records would be released. But I think it, really had a great outcome, not only in terms of the story itself, but also just in my development as a reporter, because it really gave me, great experience under my belt to sift through all of those records and write that series of stories. And so I think, something I've talked a lot about with my peers who are also in journalism is kind of the imposter syndrome we can feel as interns sometimes, going into a professional newsroom when we may not have been in that setting before. But that is definitely something that's worth overcoming because, we're super capable of finding stories like this that are great experiences for us to work on. So it's definitely, worth putting yourself out there and taking that initiative, I think.
Yeah. And Denise, as a publisher, I mean, what do you think about sort of reporters taking that initiative and being taking an active role?
Well, one of the things that I like hearing, and I am hearing from Shifra, is that it is sort of a tightrope. A student intern comes in and doesn't really know, should they jump in or should they wait, and it's the cues that they may be looking for that will allow them to do what we're hoping they will do. Like Andy, a lot of us are in smaller newsrooms. We're working with very small staffs. We want new reporters, interns to come in and show us what they've got. We know they've got something because they applied for this. They're in school. So, let's see what you've got and let's work together. But I think listening to Shifra, there is sort of that moment, and for her it was only 2 days, to find that sweet spot where she knew, okay, I've got something here. Let me test it, see if it's going to work. And she got the green light. So that's it. I think I don't know how we address that, with our internship programs. And maybe she might have some recommendations, but I think that is a little bit of a challenge. We are looking for journalists. We're not looking for students, right? But we recognize they're students. So, and these students hopefully want to be journalists. They don't want to be students. So, how do we get past that impasse, get through that, so that we can get the work done?
It's somewhat of, the environment that you find yourself in, and fostering an environment where people feel like they can stand up and say, hey, I want to cover this, or I want to do this. And Rick, I know when you were editor at the Capitol, you had a stand-up. It always was always such an interesting thing to me. You had a stand-up every week where reporters and editors would compliment one another or really share. And could you talk a little bit about creating an environment that fosters that kind of support?
Well, I think that's really common to most good newsrooms. There's a regular opportunity for conversation. The newsroom working now, it's not weekly, but there are regular stand-up meetings. I'm not sure where that phrase comes from, but it seems to be a newsroom thing. I will say that this is my second summer doing this through MDDC, and what I've told every intern, and I think I told Shifra this at the beginning, is that it's a really good idea to walk into these internships with an idea of what you want to accomplish, and not just build skills, but try and be a little bit more specific. Is there a topic you're interested in? I think that it would probably be a bad idea for an intern to come in and say, I'd like to expose corruption in Washington, unless, of course, they're doing an internship in Washington. And I think most interns understand that, they're getting into, a local newsroom that has a very specific beat, and, understanding that beat is part of what helps you maybe adjust those goals. But I've suggested that every intern, what do you want to think about? What do you want to walk away from at the end of these 8 or 10 weeks? And think about it in terms of, are you going to be happy just waiting for a story to drop in your lap because someone's on vacation? I mean, that is in reality how a lot of newsrooms use their internships. So having a realistic idea that's based on a conversation with your editor about what you could do over these periods, it makes it, I think, a much more rewarding experience. The fact that Shifra hit that, found a story of her own. I know that Andy's team, a previous reporter there was an internship in our newsroom in Annapolis, and he had written about that, and we had talked about that, I think, while he was in Frederick. And then Shifra following on this, she's really found the sweet spot, mixing a story that she's found herself with something that the paper has a distinct interest in. I don't know how you could hit it any better than that.
Right. And so, that just strikes me as whenever you're going into a new situation, sort of understanding and clarifying what you want to get out of that situation is a great professional tool to carry with you in whatever situation you find yourself. So for you, Shifra, what are you doing after the 28th, which I know is when your internship closes down at the Frederick News-Post?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So I am taking the rest of the summer off to spend time with my family and step away from journalism for a couple of weeks. But after that, when the fall semester starts at school, I am going to continue working at the Diamondback, where I'll be the news editor for the second year. So I'm definitely going to take a lot of what I learned this summer back there. I manage a desk of about 13 staff writers and kind of delegate coverage about the greater College Park community. And so I think working in a professional local news environment this summer has really kind of taught me more about what readers want to see and sort of the types of stories that interest people on the daily. And so I think kind of going back to that school paper experience, I'll take a lot of what I've learned here at the FNP.
Sure. And so in your and before we started recording, Andy was saying that news intern was sort of a narrow viewpoint of what you've done this summer. So have you gotten to be involved with some of the audience development pieces and seeing what goes online. Like, tell us more about how you've gone beyond news, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say that kind of on the daily, the bulk of what I am doing involves writing and reporting. But outside of kind of just strictly our news desk, I've also gotten to help with a couple of feature stories, which are a little bit more out there, a little bit more on the creative side, kind of just stuff that talks about the community and opportunities for people to get involved in arts and culture and community events. And so stuff like that has really been great, especially since in the past I've largely been into more of hard news reporting. And so kind of being able to see that other side of stuff and how our features editor and the rest of that team works to kind of develop story ideas based on what the community is interested in and sort of what culture, arts, dining opportunities, et cetera, there are out there has been really cool. Because I know that's kind of a big area of interest for our readers as well.
Sure. Lots of different areas to delve into. Andy, did you want to elaborate on sort of what makes you see Shifra in a more expansive light?
Yeah, what I was referring to more is the range of what she's had a chance to report on and write about. It's very understandable and common that feature ideas that stack up that we don't get to, and we do so few features in the course of doing the day-to-day, we just don't have a chance to go beyond that. And so it's often like, well, let's just wait till the intern gets here and they can take on these features, which I value, and I hope that there is value to that. But there's also more to it than that. And what I look for are the ability to dive into certain topic areas, to break hard news. As Shifra said, she did do some feature writing. She did some quick hits on things. And so I think and even some sports, and we sent her to cover basketball a little bit. So I think in that range, there was the ability to explore different long and short and topic areas and range in how, whether it's a quick turnaround or something that's more a few day enterprise piece. And I think we did hit a lot of areas. Of course, as the time is running down, and I hate hearing that number that she's going to be gone in a week. That really, anyway, there's more that we want to do. We want to make sure they are exposed to going out on breaking news and covering government meetings and covering press conferences. I think we still need a little more to do to hit some of those things. And we even talked about a long range enterprise piece, but the summer just goes by so quickly that we didn't get to that.
It does. And so, Denise, I'm curious from your standpoint, how can interns or early in career professionals use mentors and find mentors in the field? I mean, Shifra had the benefit of, we teamed you together for a variety of reasons that we felt like you all would be a good fit together, but sort of out in the wild, how do people take advantage of mentoring opportunities and what does that look like?
Well, one of the things, that's a good question, because I could still use a mentor. I might call Shifra for that.
We all use a mentor.
But, as you're out and about, she runs a newsroom, right? And I'm sure she's out, her staff of reporters are out covering stories that they're finding other professional journalists covering as well. So maybe, they can begin to talk and network with folks and kind of get a sense of if someone that they see more than once or twice would be willing to share advice. Maybe the word mentor might overwhelm folks, but sort of develop that relationship. So I think that's one way of doing it. Of course, being a part of professional organizations, journalism organizations that students have that are supported by professionals is another way of locking people in. A lot of times students, from my experience, ask for internships, but they just don't know how to reach out. And then it's up to the mentor to keep that door open because we know life happens. But, that's what I really believe, that there are a lot of us out here who are doing day-to-day work who have time, 10, 15 minutes a week at least to share information or just to have conversations about the business. And once they put that focus on that person that they would want to talk with. Go ahead and approach and see if they're open to building that kind of relationship.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I feel like sometimes the word mentor just feels so like, oh, the mentor. But everyone has sort of, I think of it sometimes in capsule mentoring, like, you want to know a specific skill or an area, and it sometimes makes it a little bit more manageable to reach out. And in that same vein, Rick, like it is a gift and a wonder to have a writing coach that is focused only, that is focused on you for 8 weeks, and you're very available to our interns. But how do you think, early in career journalists or interns can kind of keep that idea of that writing coach going outside of an academic world or whatnot? Because you always want to improve your writing. So what would be your tips going forward?
There's this idea in education, and I don't know how valuable it is, that, if you, as a young writer, if you struggle with the rules, grammar and punctuation, it may mean that you learn to read and write from reading. And I think that is, an incredibly valuable tool that that young journalists should take advantage of. And that is continuing to learn how to write by reading. Select, a wide variety of publications and authors, find ideas in terms of structure and meter, and organization. The idea of, I think at this point in my career, the logical flow of thought in a column comes relatively easy. But that can be hard for someone at the beginning in their career. I can remember, coming back from covering things when I was a young reporter and sort of organizing it in my head while I was driving back to the office in the days where you couldn't file, from a city council chamber. And so, learning how stories are put together, learning ways of telling a story that are different, seeing people try things in terms of writing or graphic presentation, really is the best way to learn after you're out of that structure where you have a dedicated mentor. And I think, just because of what's happened in newsrooms with declining size, it's the rare newsroom that has a dedicated writing coach or someone who's going to talk to you about the craft. You learn on the fly. Those conversations with your editor may be 2 minutes, but those 2 minutes are crucial for imbuing lessons of what that news organization wants and sees as important. So really, I think the best thing that young journalists can do is just read widely. Try not to stick to the same sources over and over again. The New York Times has a great voice, and sometimes what they do is wonderful. But reading the best of local journalism, or the best of sports journalism, or the best of podcast, best of various blogs. There's a variety of styles and ways to put pieces together, and experiencing that as a consumer is a really valuable tool.
Absolutely. So, Andy, I'm going to turn to you with that sort of same. How do you keep the learning going as an intern, and also what you would think the strategies for integrating into a newsroom and kind of keeping that professional environment going after the internship ends.
Connected to the internship program in my newsrooms for many years, and we've had to cope with it. I remember an intern when I worked in Hagerstown turning in a story. Lots of great interns come through, but I've also seen the moments where somebody is just lost and they don't really know how to. And I said, well, there's some issues with this. How about we sit down and go over that? And it was like a light bulb went on. What? Somebody's actually going to talk to me about my story? And we went into a conference room and went over it for line by line for 15 minutes. That's how we do things in the newsrooms I've always been in, but I can easily see how the time to go over improvements gets lost. We're in a hurry. We're always in a hurry. And I'm glad your story is in. I'll talk to you tomorrow. So I think that the development can happen in the moment, and we sit down and talk through every story, not just our interns, our reporters, every single story, every single time that we go over it line by line. We talk through it. that might be a luxury in a lot of places, especially when you're not always in the newsroom together. You're working remotely. But I appreciate anybody who can speak up for themselves too, not to put the burden on them, but I can point to a few reporters who stand out in my time, who will stand over you and say, when can we talk? Is now good? And I will drop what I'm doing for that, because I appreciate that. It's an important collaborative process, and you are advocating for yourself, and I'm going to make sure you get that time.
Yeah, that's terrific. Shifra, I mean, you've been the hopefully beneficiary of a lot of this effort and whatnot. And I know you're going to go back to your student newsroom. There's some things that you said you wanted to bring in, but where does this set you on your path to either become a journalist or incorporate more journalism into your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone else also covered it really well, but I think it's just taught me the importance of building relationships, in the newsrooms I'm in and in the industries I'm in, and also standing up for myself as a reporter and saying, hey, this is what I want to work on. This is what I'm interested in. Do you have suggestions as to how I can do it? Because I think, that kind of advocacy is really important to keep doing well in this field. So I think it's been really great to be able to get that experience here.
Terrific. Well, thank you all so much for talking to us, and almost like a little case study on Shifra's internship with the Frederick News-Post. Can't wait to hear more from you as a journalist as things progress. And thanks to each of you. I know supporting our internship program and our interns it does take time and effort and consideration. I really appreciate the work that you all have put in to the program. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a real pleasure. Good luck, Shifra. Stay in touch.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to 5 Dubs with Rebecca Snyder. Please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts so that others can find us. What do you want to know about local journalism? Email me at rsnyder, SNYDER, at MDDCpress.com. Interested in supporting our podcast and journalism? Please donate to our 501c3 Press Foundation. Find out more and see the full episode list and show notes at www.5-dubs.com.